So hello everyone, my name is Eileen Laskowski and I'm the Education and Programs Manager at the Sam Russell Museum, and I'm here with Jenn Volkmar doing our fourth artist interview as part of the ArtConnects summer exhibition. So Jenn, would you like to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about what you do as an educator as well as an artist?
Sure. I am Jenn Volkmar, and I currently teach at Great Falls Public Schools at East Middle School. I also teach for MSU Northern and MSU Great Falls as well, for people who want to be teachers. My background is in graphics and advertising and business, as well as the arts. And so I have an undergrad in graphic design, and that's where I first started. And I worked in the business world, and then I got into education later after being part of the business world for years, and currently teach 8th grade art at East Middle School.
So I have just a couple questions that I'd like to ask you about your work as an artist. Maybe you can start out by telling me a little bit about what inspires your work?
I think resilience to situations and life has always driven the art that I create, and I believe that you have to have a passion for what you're doing as well, because I think that it's like anything else, like writer's block, that if you're not interested or you're not engaged in the subject or the media, then it tends to be a very long process. And it doesn't always end up as a success, even though we sometimes think that our failures are successes. But I think resilience is something that has always driven me.
Do you have a medium of choice that you prefer to work in?
That's hard. And when I read that question, I think that's really hard. I love to paint, and I really love texture, and I love acrylics, and I like watercolors, but I really love the texture effect of things. And many of my teaching partners will say that. They'll say, "Oh, that's Jenn, the designer and the texture lady." And I really love that. But I naturally come by the graphic design and the design world, so I tend to like to still do that and some bold things as well. That's more graphic than abstract.
I like that you talk about resiliency in your artwork. And do you feel that the artwork that you do or your art practice inspires your education and the work that you do with students as a teacher, or vice versa?
I think sometimes it really depends on your audience with your students, because I think that students look up to their teachers to be able to see where they could go if they had some practice and some more education or advanced education in what we do. But sometimes I think it also hinders us a little bit, because we get stuck in the everyday use of what we do with our students, and then we forget to challenge ourselves sometimes to go out there and try new things. And so we get a little bit too comfortable, and I'm not very good at that. I want to keep learning. I want to keep doing. And so that sometimes is a hindrance to it.
What can you tell me about your creative process and how you go from start to finish on the piece? So you've talked about how you enjoy texture and you have influence in design. Is that part of your process?
I think so. I think that when I go look for subjects, it seems a little bit more difficult to do, and then all of a sudden you'll be somewhere and you'll be like, oh wait, this is something that is really it attracts me. It attracts me to look at it. It attracts me to find it and figure out how it was made or created. And so I like to do that. That's a great part of technology, is to go out there and watch and learn on some videos, or talk to coworkers or artists, and then I kind of go back and I'll use it, and then I'll be like, oh, I like this, or, oh, this isn't so much like me.
Yeah.
And I also think that, like many artists, if we have a deadline, sometimes it's better,
Hmm.
um, because we could work on things forever and ever and ever. And I think that we're always refining and changing, and that's just the nature of being a visual person. And so I think that sometimes deadlines are really good in the process, because you get down to it and you say you have to have something done. Otherwise, it sits in the studio and
Yes.
it get done, or it sits on the floor
Yeah.
and it changes, ever changing.
Hmm.
So I do think that that's part of the process. And I think that nature has always been something. I'm a very outdoors person, and so I tend to be outside a lot. And we are on a boat, and we have a place at the lake, and so being out there in nature and seeing it and being on the water is often very inspirational as a starting point for me. And I've always found nature to be intriguing. And so lots of what I do will have to do with nature, or the resilience of things like trees, or buildings, or plants, animals, things like that, and how they manage to survive, and they're ever changing based on the environment that they're in. And so I think that starts the flow for me too, is to be able to see some of that. And the longer that we're at the lake, or the longer that we're on the water, or the longer we go back to one spot, and I see it change, that's something that it makes me want to continue to go through a process and change what I'm doing, or what I'm painting, or what I'm photographing, or and so I think that's how it all gets started, and then it just kind of evolves from there.
I just love that idea of resiliency.
I believe that there's a lot of relationship between nature and animals and plants and trees and environments and people. And when people have had tough times, or we've all experienced physical and emotional difficulties or medical issues, I think that we are somewhat like nature, and that we can come back and we can grow stronger or differently based on whatever that experience has been. And so I always come back to that idea that resilience comes from the ever-changing environment that we've been in.
I have on here, what is one piece of advice that you would give to young people or aspiring artists?
I think one of the biggest things, not just as a teacher, but as a parent and as a person, and particularly maybe a lady as well, I think that exploration and practice is, again, something that is always in the forefront of my mind of advice to students, or people in general that want to be in the arts.
Mm-hmm.
Because we may think, just like I said, we may think that we really love watercolors, or we love ceramics, or sculptures, and then all of a sudden we get introduced to something else, and that becomes something different. And a few years down the road, people may say, gosh, I really enjoyed working in encaustic, or gosh, I really need to explore a little bit more of this or that. And so I think that not just being set in one way,
Mm-hmm.
but versatile, and always willing to explore, is something new, would be something that I would say.
I think that's good. That's good advice for life.
And I just think
General.
that sometimes looking at our failures with constructive criticism gives us a good appreciation or a gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
and an ability for us to dissect our processes and our successes with our failures, is something that I think the longer we live and the older we get, the easier it is to be able to do that. And sometimes those of us who have been around a little while think those failures are better than some of our successes because of that.
How do you see art as being vital to our society, and why do you think it's important to make, and perhaps especially now?
I think, again, I think it goes back to therapy and resilience of the human nature. And I think it's important, but I happened to be in a store yesterday, and a gentleman came in and he was looking for a sewing machine. And he asked if there were any sewing machines for sale. And the lady said, we had 65 of them and they're all gone.
Wow.
And to me, that just, it reiterated the arts and the creative process, no matter what people do, as to why it is so important that they continue to be sustained, not just in education, but in the world, especially during this time, because people rely on that. When they can't be around people, they want to be doing something. And so that creative, whether it's painting or whether it's collage or whether it's sculpture or whether it's sewing or quilting or things like that, it's something that people really want to do. And those trades and it's a feel-good thing to accomplish something, and to, whether you have to YouTube it or whether you have instructions in front of you, or you're a brand new painter and you're learning the types of paintbrushes or how to use watercolor pencils or things like that. I think our brains inactive too long is not good. And I think that it keeps us from going crazy, really. And I think that I hear that on a daily basis from people that whatever it is that they're doing, whether they're tying flies or whether they're creating sculptures or kinesthetic things, people want to do things and they want to be creative, and during this time I feel like it's gotten more. I just go back to doing and being active, and all of us in our good mindset will be so much more resilient and so much different because of where we've been. I always go back and I listen to people, and they talk about how art sells when times are good and economics are good, but they're there when we need them, because we need something good to look at or to be part of or to help create and be productive with our hands. And I just think that there's not one person that I know of in my life that isn't creative somehow, and how that has gotten them through what we've got through in the last 3 months. But it's just something that makes us feel good. Mm-hmm. And I think the more we feel good, the better we are, and our souls and our bodies are going to heal from everything that is happening right now out in the world.
Well, thank you so much, Jen, for your interview today. It was very inspiring and a pleasure to hear about your process, both as an artist and a teacher.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time with me.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.